Hello and welcome to this episode of CV Remote Solutions Master Series, where we address gaps and barriers to care for patients with implanted cardiac devices. In this episode, we will focus on answering key questions around device clinic staffing. My name is Dr. James Allred. I'm an electrophysiologist and co-founder of CV Remote Solutions and your host for this series. Today, we are joined by Laura Van Hill, Director of Clinical Operations with CV Remote Solutions and senior author on the recently published Time and Motion trial. Laura, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Allred. I've been a device nurse for about 31 years. And in that time, I oversaw the running of a clinic for more than 20 years. Our clinic grew over the course of those years from about 280 patients to greater than 6,000. I've collaborated with other clinics across the country to discuss best practices. I've been involved in research with industry to help bring better products to the clinics. And as you mentioned today, I am the Director of Clinical Operations at CV Remote Solutions.
Thank you, Laura. This is such an important topic today. I can't stress, the number of times when I'm talking to clinics, how the key, questions of staffing come up. And so I'm really looking forward to your thoughts today. You mentioned that you've done this for a really long time. Tell us how your approach to device clinic staffing has evolved.
Well, the reality is that the pool of qualified candidates, even over all these years, really has unchanged. Hiring an experienced RN into a clinic is not a reality for most clinics. So we tend to look for people with some type of cardiovascular experience. But most of the people we get are really not trained in device therapy. We also try to hire support staff to help those nurses so that the nurse is actually working at the top of her license. We need support staff to do patient calls, monitoring, troubleshooting. We need to hire support staff to help with patient calls, monitor troubleshooting, disconnected monitors, scheduling, and all the other nuances that go with managing device therapy. As the devices became more complex and their functions grew, we also needed to provide ongoing education. To keep and maintain staff was really our goal. So people needed to feel as if they were good at what they did. We collaborated with industry to bring learning opportunities to our staff. I never considered outsourcing for my staffing. I always trained within. I didn't consider it because the people that were available, or the companies that were available to outsource and help us provide staffing to our clinics, always wanted to bring in their own database. They never met us where we were. And so it always seemed that I had to find people, educate those people, and try to keep those people.
I think that's a really important thing to consider is keeping those people. I find that it seems in my practice that from the time you convince your administrators to post a position until that person is fully trained and up to speed is almost about an 18-month journey. And then, the duration of someone in the clinic these days is almost, somewhere between 3 and 5 years. So once you've trained them, once you've invested in them, retaining them is an important part of the process. And so I agree with you on that. Can you speak a little bit more to retention of staff and how do you see that happening today?
Retention of staff was a bit of a trick. You had to understand what kind of situation you were putting them in, making sure they were very qualified, that they could meet and the EP almost at their level. They needed to be ongoing education. They needed to feel confident in what they were doing. They needed to feel as if the administration had their back and supported them with what they were doing, and that they were working at the top of their license, that you didn't have nurses doing secretarial work, that they felt like they were providing patient care. We also had to be sure that it didn't feel like, I always say, the house was on fire. They had to have a normal work life. There's a work-life balance that I always told the people I hired. One is, don't bring your work home to work, and don't bring your work home. And that way we both win. So making sure that our staffing patterns were correct, that we didn't overburden the nurses and make it feel like every day they couldn't get their job done, was not the way to do business. If you want to keep people, they have to feel like they're doing good work and that we value their time. We expect a lot of them, always do, but it doesn't mean that at the end of a day, they feel that they weren't successful.
I agree fully. It's about culture, and setting a successful culture within a device clinic can really be a challenge. And that's certainly something that I think you've done very well in your clinic. What impact did time and motion have on how you think about device clinic staffing?
Yeah, so the time and motion study was interesting for me because we were actually part of it. And we thought we really had a good model, but every clinic that ever I talked to said, how did you come up with this idea that you needed, I always said 700 patients per nurse. It depended on what we were doing. And we had a list of different areas that we supported. When we did the time and motion study, it actually opened my eyes, because what I realized is that you can't say, well, we have 2,500 patients and one or two nurses can probably take care of that. Maybe one admin or secretarial person can help us with that. It actually proved that if you're going to do it and do it correctly, we need 5.4 people. And that loop recorders taking 9.5 hours per patient per year was something we never really thought about. We think they're somewhat quick and easy, but they have so many alerts, and they are definitely a burden on the clinic. So the time and motion study did actually prove our model of hiring, but it also gave power to other clinics to explain to administration and those people who didn't quite understand what it takes to do the work, that this is what it takes to really run a clinic well and retain staff.
Time and motion has really been discussed a lot lately. The buzz around this trial is really impressive. And so congratulations to you, to Amber Seiler, the first author, and the rest of that team. You guys did an amazing job there. We'll put the link to that trial in the YouTube kind of comments, and we'll post it right here just so that folks will have that, because I think it's a really important thing that everyone, if you're thinking staffing in 2023 for a device clinic, time and motion should be your go-to article, because honestly, I think that's the best and most up-to-date information we have. So let's change subjects just a little bit and talk about training. I said in my clinic, it takes a really long time to train someone to manage devices. And so when you hire new staff, what have you found to be the most successful options for training new staff members?
So I have to start a bit at the beginning, because this is how I decided what I was going to do. I got trained by an electrophysiologist that sort of said, see how I do that? You do it. And that was okay, but it wasn't I didn't have the background. And so then I trained someone. So that person knew what I remembered to know. And that's not a very good way to learn something. Eventually, we realized that industry put a lot of effort into some education. There's Medtronic Academy, Boston Educare, and our representatives of that company on site could also help us. We had to leverage everything that we could. HRS has wonderful education materials. So what we did was we decided to put an orientation package together, and we wrote it out. We took the time to write out exactly what we wanted people to know, and then we scheduled it into their day. And so that they would read and learn something, and then they would work with one of our staff as a preceptor, so they could take some, let's start. So they could take something they had read and then apply it. And we did that every day for a year. And so we went from the very basics to advanced. And I actually made most of the people who started with me who had a lot of cardiovascular background, I made them review even anatomy and physiology, because I didn't know what they didn't know. And that way they could also grab onto, oh yeah, I know that. So give them some confidence, because we're throwing a lot of new information at them. And anywhere where you can build confidence that they actually know part of this electrophysiology world, actually help them want to be more of it. In part, by having them know some of the information, it actually helped them want to be more involved and continue to learn and grow in their education in the clinic. Once, we also had a formal checklist. We didn't just leave it to chance that they did all this. We did sign off that they did pacemakers, so many pacemakers, so many ICDs, so many loop recorders, read so many remotes, and that they did it well, so that we could prove that they had actually had a formal education. And I think it's really good to do, because you can get so busy in your days that you may have missed something, and without that checklist, it helped make sure that we had given them the full education that they needed. We also made sure that the industry sat down with them and reviewed how to use the programmers. We wanted them to get that formal education as much as we could along the way.
Laura, you've been a huge part of clinic optimization through efforts with CB Remote Solutions, and specifically consulting with clinics across the country in your own practice and otherwise. And so there are nuggets, there are golden pearls and things that you've learned along the way. And are there any things that you'd like to share for folks when considering device clinic staffing?
I think making sure that the people you hire feel like the team has their back, and that you will invest in them to be sure that they are good at what they do. Most clinics under hire and feel like if one or two people can do a lot of the work, that ends up in turnover, because once you've burned those people out, they will leave. If they can, you can't do that every day where you feel like you're not being successful. You need to feel as if you're being successful and that you're doing good patient care. Turnover, it's so costly in this world, because the next person you hire does not know this business, and you will start all over again. You never get your clinic to that running smooth and things are going well and you can improve what's happening if you're always just at the beginning and at the training level. You never get where your excellent things are happening within your clinic, and that people are taking ownership of making sure it is functioning and really streamlined. That's where you get your efficiencies. If you make sure that your people, you have retention and they're looking to improve things, and they're making it work well, that is where actually you save money. And I don't know if clinics always realize that part.
You know, Laura, I think there's so many pearls that you could share with us. And I think the ones that you've shared have been really, really valuable. In our final question, you mentioned earlier having folks work to the top of their license. What are tips for making that happen?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that we as nurses do is sometimes we just say, well, I'll do that myself, instead of stopping and training the person who maybe should be doing it, how to do it well. And by allowing that person you've hired to do their job well, you end up having a team that has each other's back. You're working together, and you actually can make things smoother, and you feel like you're doing good work. Everyone has their place within the clinic, and in the long run, it is best for your team if you can collaborate, meet, and then trust each other. It leads to a more satisfying work life.
Thanks again, Laura Van Hill, for sharing your best practices and insights on mastering device clinic staffing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, and please come back to view the other episodes in the CV Remote Solutions Master Series. This series was produced through support from CV Remote Solutions. Learn more about CV Remote Solutions and its device clinic optimization efforts by visiting www.cvremotesolutions.com.